What is up, guys? I hope you're doing great. Today we're gonna be talking about Rails routes, and I'm gonna tell you pretty much everything you need to know about them. And yeah, we're gonna go over a couple of things. So few concepts. Yeah, 9 concepts in total. And yeah, let's just get started. So basically, the way we want to think about a route is pretty simple. A route is one entry point to your application. So it allows an external client or user to interact with your application and get a response back, right? And so, yeah, that's just the way we want to be thinking about routes in general. Every time we open a route, we're opening an entry to our application. If we have no routes, then there's no entry in our application. And so the anatomy of a route is pretty simple, but it's very good to know it. So basically, a route is always an HTTP verb, and we'll go over HTTP verbs here. And then we have a path, so that's the path that the user types in, the URL that he types in the browser. And here we tie the route, the path and the HTTP verb to a controller and an action. Okay? So an example of this is what we have here. For example, we got the HTTP verb is get, and then the path is products, and this will call the index method or action of the products controller. We can also write this route this way: controller, products, and action index. This is equivalent, this is the same, and Rails allow you to write these two syntaxes. Choose the one that is best for you. Usually you'll see people use this one more because this one is this one is the one that is in the docs, and the people are most used to it. But then this one I think is also good because it offers more clarity. But yeah, so the path is the URL that the user will type in the browser. The controller is the file that will handle the request. The action is the method inside the controller that will handle the request. The HTTP verb is the HTTP verb that the user will use to make the request, and the two parameter, as we saw, is the combination of controller and action that will handle the request. So what are HTTP verbs? Well, let's open this link. Actually, I have it open here. And so HTTP verbs are basically a part of the HTTP protocol, and so they are used to differentiate different requests, different types of requests that are made from a client to a server. And basically we have different types of requests that interact with the data in different way. What I mean is that most often, for example, in this page, this is a GET request because all I'm doing is retrieving data from this server. However, sometimes when we do a request to a server, we are creating data. For example, we're signing up to a website, we're creating our user account. Sometimes we are updating our profile or updating a product description or something, and then and that's why we use different verbs like put and patch. And lastly, sometimes we delete data, and that's why most generally it's the best practice is to use the delete HTTP verb. So that's that's an overall overview, let's say, of what HTTP verbs are. I'll get to more details into them later in other videos, but that's pretty much what you need to know about the HTTP verbs that we are using, and that will allow you to craft your routes in the appropriate manner, right? So let's say we are working on an e-commerce website and we have lists of products. We have a resource products, right? So basically here you can see that we're gonna use get for showing the list of products, and if we want to have a route that will allow us to create products through a form, for example, then the form will be pointed towards this route that will allow us to create new products, and then we will have an update route and a delete route for the products. So this is called the dynamic segment, and we will see this afterwards. Yeah, so dynamic segments we'll talk about here, but before that I wanted to talk about visible versus invisible routes. Invisible routes. Basically, that's a part of what we talked about here with HTTP verbs. Because as you can see, this route is something we're gonna access directly in the browser, but there is like invisible routes that are actually not accessible with the browser. So that are the routes that actually create the product, so or update a product or delete a product. You're not gonna be able to access these routes, and actually any route that has HTTP verb different than get, you're not gonna be really able to access via your browser. Those routes are usually accessible through a form, and they are called and triggered through a form, for example, or through through an API call, for example. So yeah, those what I call invisible routes. I like to call them this way because in the past I remember I used to have trouble understanding where these routes were living, basically. So yeah, those routes we can call invisible routes. They're obviously super important to manage data in our application, but then you have visible routes that are more and they're more easy to understand, I would say, and obviously they're accessible. So let's take the example of the creation of a new product. We want to create a new product, and so we're gonna visit the page products/new, and it's gonna call the new method in the products controller, and there we will have a form where we will be able to enter all information about our product, right? And the moment we're gonna submit the form in this page, we will need to call a route to insert the product in the database and have a route and a controller and an action that will handle that. And this is where we have to define this route, and this route will call the right action that will create a new product in the database. So that's what I mean by visible versus invisible routes. Then we can go quickly over dynamic segments. Dynamic segments are basically the dynamic part of a URL, and here the example is pretty obvious. So we have lists of products, and when we're gonna go see a details page of a product, then in the URL we will have its ID, and this ID will allow us in the controller to retrieve the right product, and display its information. And also this is valid for every route where we need to know a specific product, so editing, deleting, etc. And finally, here I wanted to go over resources. So basically, resources are a collection of routes. This is something that Rails allow you to do, and it's very handy because it allows you to write way less routes with just one line. So let's take again the example of products. We, instead of writing all these routes that we will need for the management of the products, well, Rails allows us to write resources products, which is the controller name basically. And Rails will actually automatically, by reading this in our routes file, create all these routes for us. Yeah, and this is usually what you will see in Rails applications, and this is yeah, very useful. And this is also what's happening when you use scaffolding in Rails. So scaffolding will create your controller, your routes using resource, your model, etc., the table in the database. And you can also restrict the routes that are created with resource by adding only parameter and specifying the only routes you want, or some routes you don't want. Yeah, that's pretty much it for resources. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about nested routes. And nested routes are what they sound like. So basically, there are routes inside another route. So here we have a good example for reviews for restaurants. We want every review to be scoped or attached to a restaurant. So that's why in our URL we want this type of URL that allows us to specify a restaurant ID. And the way to create these routes with resources, is simply by using nested routes like so. So we have a resource and we use a block, and then inside we can specify another resource. So that is another controller, another model. And that's the way we do nested routes in Rails. So yeah, that's what I wanted to cover with this video about Rails routing. Basically, we saw that every route was an entry point to our application. We saw the anatomy or the structure of a route. We saw what HTTP verbs were. We saw visible versus invisible routes. We saw dynamic segments, resources, and nested routes. So I hope you guys liked this video about Rails routing. I'm planning on doing more videos like this about some concepts of Rails, like models, views, controllers. So let me know if you liked it. I just opened a new school group. So basically, that's a group where I'll be posting more about Ruby on Rails, about my journey as a Ruby on Rails developer and freelancer, and share with you tips and advice, and also courses on how to become a Ruby on Rails developer, freelance developer, and become an efficient developer overall. So yeah, the link is in the description. If you want to join, it's free. And yeah, see you there. Again, if you like this video, let me know, give it a thumbs up so I can do other videos like this. And yeah, thank you for watching, and see you soon.